Okay, just so everyone should know, we've pressed record on the video.
Which is, don't worry, it won't be for public consumption unless it goes really, really well. In which case please God it will. We'll put it on like a private YouTube link, and then whoever couldn't make it today can also get to hear what we're talking about. So, welcome everybody to a special edition of the St Anne's Ladies Group shiur talk afternoon, and a special edition because it's the equivalent of Ascot Ladies' Day, but St Anne's Glendower Hotel Men's Day. So welcome to the men.
We'll give ourselves a round of applause.
I hope you don't mind.
It's fantastic as men coming to a women's session because we don't have to worry about 10 minions, all that stuff we have to worry about. We can just let our hair down. If we have. I actually had that in my head, but I was like, don't say that. That's one of the reasons rabbis wear big capels, by the way. Yeah?
Hides a multitude of sins.
Yeah.
No, not so.
So welcome to the men, and including yours truly. So, shall I open it?
Are you okay? Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to start?
You were going to start. I'm happy to start if you want.
Okay, so, seeing as we're doing opposites, and we usually say ladies first, so this time we'll do men first.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I'd like to thank Rabbi St Anne, my Rebbeson. She's as much my Rebbeson as she's your Rebbeson, for the wonderful work that she does in this gathering. And it's been a dream of mine. Yes. I had a dream. It's been a dream of mine to join this group with the men. Not that we're going to take over. This is a one-off.
Summer special.
And you as the ladies will decide how many times you want to have one-offs. That'll be up to you, not up to me. We're going to talk about relationships. My wife will talk about a little bit about that later. But I want to start off with a story. Apologies for anyone who was in shul on Friday night. It's the same story, but I think it's quite powerful. It's a story about October the 7th, which really frames the situation of the Jewish people today, what we face as a Jewish people from an internal perspective. A disclaimer for this story is that some people find these stories quite difficult because of perhaps the implications of what we're saying. And I wanted to say from the start that no tragedy that befalls the Jewish people, October the 7th, or the Holocaust, I just came back from Poland, a trip which we can also potentially talk about as well, whether it's 1290, the expulsion of the Jews, 1492, right, whether it's the tragedy this week of the adoption of the Kairos document by the Church of England and the ramifications of that. These things are beyond that, they're beyond our understanding from God's perspective. We can't try and understand and play God. However, there are still within our ability to draw inspiration from certain events which we can see the hand of God, we can see divine providence. And that's the context in which I tell this story, which I heard this week. And the story is, it was March 2023, and a young man, married man, called Yaakov, a secular man, not a religious man, was on Kavish Aleph. For those who know Kavish Aleph, the main motorway tributary between Tel Aviv, the secular center of Israel, some people call it, and Jerusalem, the religious center of Israel. And there he's on his journey, and like me, once upon a time, he ran out of petrol. He ran out of petrol. And people are driving past, bumper to bumper, as they do in Israel. They don't keep their distance, if you've ever driven there. Yes. And nobody's stopping to help him. And he's really stranded. And it's dangerous, very dangerous. Eventually, after quite a while, a man in a car stops. And out comes a very religiously dressed man in full religious garb, what you might call a chassid or the ultra-orthodox. And he sees this man in distress, Yaakov, and he comes to him and says, what's the matter? He tells him, says, no problems, I'll go and buy to the nearest gas station and buy you gas, petrol, whatever it is, in a can, and come back, see you soon. And so this is what they do, and he says, my name's Yehuda, by the way. He goes, gets his petrol, comes back, puts the petrol in. Yaakov turns, you can imagine the appreciation on his face, he's been saved from this terrible bother and inconvenience and challenge. And he says, how much do I pay you? How much do I owe you? And Yehuda says, pay me?
Shabbos.
There's no way you're going to pay me. It's not Shabbat. Trust me, Yehuda's not driving on Shabbat. And he says, there's no way you're paying me. This is a special favor. I'm happy to do this. It's a great mitzvah for me to do. Mitzvah tovah. And Yaakov is really overwhelmed. And he turns to Yehuda and he says, I need to show you something. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I'm a bit ashamed of myself. Takes him to the back of the car. And if you've ever been to Israel, you'll know that politics is played out on the bumper stickers of people's cars. There's all sorts of bumper stickers, right, on the backs of cars. And he had a bumper sticker, which I actually checked up. I Googled this bumper sticker. It goes from the 1980s to the 2000s, this bumper sticker. And it's obviously remained on his car ever since. And it's a bumper sticker that says, Lahadros, Lidros et Hadat. To trample on religion. This is a sticker which is the epitome of the secular left, who are anti-religious. We don't know whether it's a small minority, but a small minority of Jews who are hardliners, and they really are anti-religion in every way, shape or form. And of course we know there are major tensions in Israel. There has been since the very inception of the state, from 1948 until today. There's been so much factionalism between the religious, the different sects within religion, and the secular and the different sects within it. His pretty in-your-face statement, Lidros es saddest, to destroy or to trample on religion. Get rid of religion. We don't want it controlling our lives. Okay, we can understand. He says, I'm so sorry. I've never met a religious Jew before. This is how I was taught, and you have broken the bubble. And so today, if you're not letting me pay for the petrol, at the very least, I want to show you this. And he takes the bumper sticker and takes it off. Beautiful. Yehuda's touched by this and said, let's exchange numbers. And maybe we'll be in touch. You know, I've had these types of things happen to me. You exchange numbers, and what happens a couple of weeks later, you've forgotten all about it. Life goes on. The inspiration's dissipated. But this was different. Yehuda, who's not really come into contact with secular people living where he lives. Where does he live? Bnei Barak. And where does Yaakov live? He tells Yehuda, I live in a place called Kibbutz Be'eri. Now, we all know what Kibbutz Be'eri is, but back then, in March 2023, if I said to you, have you ever heard of Kibbutz Be'eri? Probably most of you had not heard of Kibbutz Be'eri. Here in England, we give lots of money to the UJIA, that deals with the north of Israel, Marom HaGalil. You may be able to tell me different places there, but it's a small little kibbutz. And he'd never been, Yaakov, to Bnei Barak, which is a very serious religious center of Judaism and Jewish learning. So Yehuda begins by calling him on a Friday afternoon, and this happens week after week, until eventually Yaakov gets a bit bored and is a bit torn. He's like, well, I'm not really going anywhere. We're not really sort of, hello, Shabbat Shalom. It's like he feels incumbent because he did me a favor. He saved me. So he thinks, you know what, I'll pluck up the Israeli courage to speak my mind. And he says, Yehuda, I have a question. You wish me Shabbat Shalom every week, but what is Shabbat? Like, do you really enjoy Shabbat with your family? I mean, we are free to go to do barbecues, we can go to the beach, we can go shopping, we can do whatever we want. And you are so encumbered with all these rules I've heard about and read about, seen in the TV, whatever, depicted of. It seems so restrictive. So Yehuda's not a rabbi, not trained in any way, shape or form, just says very innocently and authentically, no words can describe what Shabbat means to me and my family and how much it changes who I am as a person. The only way I could possibly start or begin to explain to you what Shabbat is if you would come for Shabbat. And so maybe you'll think about coming to Shabbat, to Bnei Barak. Suddenly he becomes a little bit more withdrawn, seeing the implication of his question, and so a few more weeks goes past, and Yaakov plucks up the courage and says, yes, I'm ready to come and visit you. Yehuda, also now a little bit unsure, says, okay, I'll speak to my wife, my rabbi, what's the best Shabbat to invite you? And he's having a discussion with his rabbi. And the rabbi says, well, it's coming up to Rosh Hashanah now. Quite a few months have gone past since March. And Rosh Hashanah is not a good time. They go through the calendar. Yom Kippur, not a very good time, obviously. Even Sukkot's not such a good time because so much busy with the Sukkahs and the Lulav and the Esrog. And then this set upon Simchas Torah. Of course, Simchas Torah that year in Israel is on Shabbat. And he says to the rabbi, but the problem is on Simchat Torah, I have to look after my father, and we go to Sderot which is ironically only 20 kilometers or so away, or 17 kilometers away from Kibbutz Be'eri. Sderot, we all know, is a town that's had so many rockets over the years. So the rabbi says, what's the problem? This year, bring your father over to Bnei Brak and bring Yaakov and his family over to the Bnei Brak. One Simchas Torah, one happy family, and that's what they do. And of course, at 6:30 in the morning on October the 7th, his father, who was in Sderot, is now in Bnei Brak, and Yaakov and his family, who are in Kibbutz Be'eri, are now not in Kibbutz Be'eri, under attack. They're in Bnei Brak, enjoying it, and trying to enjoy, at least they've been saved. They come back after this October the 7th, and they find, both of them, that their father's house was near the police station in Sderot, which infamously got burned. His house was destroyed, and so too was the house in Kibbutz Be'eri. And of course, we see from this story such a powerful thing, how instead of sinat chinam, which seems to be the cause of the fractions in our Jewish people, going back 2,000 years, the temple was destroyed, we're taught by our sages, because of hatred b'chinam. B'chinam means baseless hatred, hatred that has no purpose, no reason. The irony is there is no reason to ever hate another Jew, because every single Jew is really part of one family. Instead of that, it's been transformed into ahavat chinam, both from Yehuda, who initiated, to Yaakov, and from Yaakov to Yehuda. It's a beautiful, beautiful sort of symbolic story of how we can transform our lives in so many different ways by just breaking out of our bubble, by seeing another human being to start with as a human being before we put labels on them and judgments. It's very, very easy in our fast-paced life today to categorize people, to judge them, to prejudge. And once we've done that, we're no longer curious, and it becomes very, very difficult to reach out to them with bonds of love. So that's the first story, sort of introduction story I wanted to share with you, which I think segues on nicely to what you're going to talk about.
Thank you. It's a good one. Anybody have any comments before? I know we can't really follow that story. It's so powerful.
It's a powerful story.
It's so powerful. It's unreal, but it is real. So.
It's a real story. It's a real story. Now, obviously, I said at the beginning, the disclaimer, we're not saying that, because everybody else didn't like each other and was bad to each other, therefore they got destroyed. Chas v'shalom, God forbid. We don't understand the hand of God. We can't understand the tragedy. When Moshe Rabbeinu came to the burning bush, when he was coming to take the Jewish people out, he comes to the burning bush and he sees a bush that's burning but not being consumed. And he says, I'll turn now and go and have a look at this. So you see, number one, he's like a scientist. He's curious. That's the first thing you have to be in life, is curious about something that's outside of your understanding, your current frame of reference, or what they call in psychology your current paradigm. If you're not willing, if you wouldn't do, very nice, I'm busy, I'm busy, I've got to get to work. Who cares about a bush that's burning and not being consumed? There's no revelation. He comes and he's told a very interesting thing. He's told to take off your shoes, for the land which you are standing on is holy. And what is this burning bush? And he's told about the Jewish people, he's going to take them out. But what's the symbolism of the burning bush? It represents, say our sages, the suffering of the Jewish people throughout the ages. And Moshe Rabbeinu wants to peer into it. He wants to understand, how can it be that the Jewish people are burning, so to speak? They're being destroyed, they're being attacked. This blood libel, that blood libel, this attack, this pogrom. Throughout the ages, we're going to sit on Yom Kippur and go through the Kinot, the Lamentations, which is basically one generation after the next generation of every suffering and tragedy that's befallen the men, women and children that make up the body collective of the Jewish people. And he's peering into it. He wants to understand what it is. And what does God say? Take off your shoes, for that land, the ground which you're standing on is holy. In other words, you can't understand. It's something that transcends. In fact, it's an insult to the memories of our ancestors for us to give a human reason to try and explain. There have been, very sadly, tragically, even within the religious world, people that came along, rabbis as well, after the Holocaust, they felt a need to say an overarching reason as to why the Holocaust happened. The Lubavitcher Rebbe was vehemently against this. He tried to stamp out that type of religious messaging, and he said, no way, absolutely. The way we deal with the Holocaust is Hitler tried to destroy us, we're going to build. That's what we do, and that's of course the messaging, obviously particularly in Chabad and Lubavitch, but it's the message for every Jew. And we're here in St Anne's. Every time we come together to a minyan, to a gathering like this, and we share meaningful words, we are building. We are doing the work that's trying to be undone by all those forces outside of us. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, just to track it back a bit more, make it a bit more accessible for all of us here. And by the way, Mazel Tov, we have a new Prime Minister
Yes.
as of a few hours ago. So just as the right here and now very relevant for us, just to be aware of that you mentioned before, we are in the 9 days now, which is very the saddest. Well, we have the 3 weeks and culminating in the 9 days, and we're now, is it day 5 of the 9 days?
Yesterday was day 5. Today is
On
day 6.
day 6 of the 9 days, so we have the 3 weeks, which is the 3 weeks of mourning all Jewish tragedies throughout history, and that energy, sort of negative energy, is sort of in the air, so to speak, although we can paradoxically transform it, because everything, we don't want to live in doom and gloom, we want to live in changing the darkness to light type attitude. So we're in the 9 days, now day 6, culminating on Wednesday night, Thursday in Tisha B'Av, the saddest day, but paradoxically has the potential to be the happiest day because it has the potential for Mashiach to come. So right now, even though we are feeling the mourning, and that is represented in the fact that we're not supposed to wash, so I'm not sure if this shirt might need washing.
Well, it's just not been ironed. There are some communities that take this very seriously. I mean, you can see people walking around with like lines in their
looking very
shirts.
sloppy.
Very sloppy.
No shaving, so usually I prefer the rabbi clean shaven, but I'll let him off seeing as it's the 9 days, no shaving. What else? No music, that's why he can bring his guitar. No meat, although tonight there's a siyum, unless you're having a siyum.
Unless you're doing you're not allowed to eat meat unless you have a reason to eat it for a sudat mitzvah, meaning a meal in association with a mitzvah.
So there's all these reminders, you know, on your phone, reminder, we've got all these very practical reminders to remind us, oh, there's something different about this time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the month is not just called Av, it's actually called Menachem Av, which is good because it's my birthday month, so it's like a sad month, but it can be a happy month as well, because Menachem means comfort. So within the pain there is the possibility of the joy and the comfort who's got to come. And on Tisha B'Av, on Wednesday night, Thursday, we read one of the 5 Megillat Eicha. Now, usually we get very excited, especially here in a ladies' setting, because, and we've spoken about more than once that time of year when it's Purim time, we celebrate Esther Hamalka, Queen Esther, and we read Megillas Esther, and we celebrate the fact that it was because of Esther and girl power and feminism, that it is only because of her that we're all here, it's the women that save the day. And then Shavuos time, also we've spoken about Megillat Ruth, with Ruth, who is the righteous convert, and again, because of her, she saved the day. Pardon?
With a goer spell.
Yes. And because of Ruth, that's the whole reason why we're here. Another woman that saved the day, and we wouldn't be here without these Jewish heroines. But we don't really get excited or want to celebrate Megillat Eicha, which is the Megillah that we're reading on Wednesday night, Thursday in Shul, because it's the Book of Lamentations. It's very sad. So who would want to get excited about reading about orphans and widows and starving people and destruction? That's basically what it's about. But I heard a beautiful idea last week that the name of the Megillah, Eicha, so it comes from the word Eich, which means how. In other words, the book is saying like how. How, it's a question, how did we get here? How did we get in this state? You know, sometimes you can have a series of bad things happen to us, God forbid, but unfortunately that's life, and it makes us think like, how on earth did I get here? Like, we sometimes have that wake up moment where, oh, this has got so bad, I've really now got to do something about it. And this idea I heard last week puts the two words of Eicha together with another word back in time, reverse time, in the time machine, back to the very beginning in Bereshis, where Adam, we know the story, does a very bad thing, and then he only afterwards gets caught up in the moment, only afterwards realizes, oh, what have I done, and goes to hide. But we know we can't hide from Hashem, but he gives him a chance, and he's calling out to him, and he says Ayeko. He calls to Adam and he says Ayeko, and you hear the similarity, Eicha, Ayeko. But Ayeko doesn't really mean the same thing. It comes from Help me out. Aye meaning where. Aye makam kavoda, with as I saying, where is the place of Hashem? He's asking, Odom Arishon, Ayeka, where are you? So it's similar to the Eicha, how, like, where are you? Like, how did you let this happen?
Well, they're exactly the same letters. Where Ayeka is exactly the same letters as Eicha, except that one is Aye, where, with a ka is a suffix meaning you, where are you, whereas Eicha is Eich, and the he at the end is just feminization, is the feminine of it. So it's interesting, you have two words that are seemingly totally different meanings, but exactly the same letters, they're just voweled differently.
But it's basically like a play on words. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing, it's basically questioning, like, where are you? Like, how did you let this happen? And that's the question we need to ask ourselves coming up to Tisha B'Av and on Tisha B'Av. Like, how have I let this bad habit or this lashon hara or whatever I'm doing that I know intrinsically I shouldn't be doing, like, how have I let it get to this state, this point? It's like a wake-up call, and then it culminates in all these practical things that we just mentioned, like the no washing, no shaving, no music, no parties, culminates in the fasting, which is makes Tisha B'Av makes Yom Kippur seem easy, doesn't it? Because the timing, especially if it's very hot, because obviously it's the same as a 25-hour fast, but because of the time of year, it's always hotter on Tisha B'Av, so it makes it harder to fast, so you feel it more. And the point of the fasting is again to remind us that this is an opportunity to really reflect, like, I'm not just this physical body that's going on doing the same thing, like I'm actually a soul. Actually, I have something else for something. Now this is from, because we have a little prep talk between ourselves, like what are we talking about today? And we had this, but this wasn't actually, it just came to me now, this wasn't on the cards. I'm actually doing, and you heard it here first, a little Reiki course. And actually this is from my Reiki course, because we have an idea that you can get wisdom from, godly wisdom fills the world, and you can get it, you can find it, it's all one reality, it's the same universe. It's always the same ideas you'll notice coming through in all these different ideas. Obviously you have to be mindful of Buddhism and all this type of stuff. But our truth, the Torah truth, does come through in many other spheres and ideas in life that are out there in the wider world. But this is from my Reiki course. I wrote this down. I'm only right, by the way, this book only has very important things written. So if it's written in my book, I think it's very important.
Got to be long.
Yes.
Words in the long.
Yes. So in my Reiki course, this is a nice idea. I thought, this is a Jewish idea, I'm writing it down. It's okay, Linda.
I like the tune though.
It's okay. So I learned this in my Reiki course, which I'm 20, and it tells you how I think I'm 26% of the way through it. I can only access it at specific times when I can. So I'm raring to go, but I'm only 26% of the way through. But at this point I've learned this, I've written down this amazing idea. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. You have a body. And I thought that's a very Jewish idea, actually. I'm writing that down. So we are a body, we are a soul in our body, and the main thing is in life is to we don't want to bypass the body. We're in a body, we listen to our body, but we also need to listen to our soul, and that's how fasting plays in to Tisha B'Av, which, please God, will be the last Tisha B'Av, because we have an idea that at any moment our redemption can come, and the most opportune time of all times of the year is on Tisha B'Av, which is this Wednesday night, Thursday.
Can I segue on to something, Stefan?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know if you've experienced the full Tisha B'Av or growing up in a religious community. It was tough. You were in shul, first of all at night time, a good couple of hours. You had the evening service, Mariv, then there was Eicha, and then they already started to do about 5 to 10 of the lamentations from the Middle Ages, or from the times just after discussing the destruction of the temple. And then the next morning you would continue with the shacharis. There's no, again, symbolizing the morning and the fact that we've lost not just the physical temple, it's the loss of the divine presence. It's the loss of connection with our divine sense of soul, that sense of electricity, that's divine electricity that's flowing into all of us. We've been cut off from that. That's why we wake up in the morning and we're so used to our physical senses. We're not in touch with who we are, truly, right? And in the morning, the paroches, that's the curtain, is taken away so that there's no curtain. And then there's further laning, and we don't put our tefillin on until later on in the afternoon, after what's known as midday chatzos. And you will continue lamentations and these dirges, essentially, from the different centuries of destruction of the different aspects of Jewry, all the way till chatzos. There's a book with the most dense Hebrew language, and I remember growing up reading from this book, which had no English. And it's like, it was amazing at honing, I was amazed, it literally helped me hone my super speed Hebrew reading, if anyone's heard me read Hebrew super fast. But it was like, it was so difficult and so boring. Wow.
Can we switch their phone to silent? Yeah, because everybody put their phone on silent, but they haven't already.
It would be funny if it was actually me sending WhatsApp messages to get you all in trouble for interrupting me. So I'm just trying to give you a picture over here of a very tense day. Yeah. But there was something very interesting. There was a custom I had growing up, which I'm going to describe to you as a little boy. Before I started reading as I grew up and I was expected to read and be involved in the kinot, the lamentations. In Chabad, in Lubavitch, and in other Hasidic places as well, they have a custom that children, remember now, all the adults are sitting on upturned chairs or sitting on the floor. They're not wearing shoes, right? They've not drunk, they've not eaten, they've not put on, certainly not put on aftershave, maybe some deodorant for basic hygiene purposes. Okay, this is a tense atmosphere, and what's happening? The children have got these bags of hard beans that you put into the cholent, but they've not been cooked, little white beans, and they're throwing them. They're everywhere. There's hundreds of these beans being thrown at the adults by the children. Yeah, causing this. And this was amazing. And as I grew up, nobody ever explained to me what this was, because it was so obvious what it was. What it was that not just, we have to have a Judaism with more joy and no oil, because we can't run away from the fact. If that's the case, then why don't we scrap Tisha B'Av? Why are we wallowing? Why don't we just get on with building something new, a new institution? Let's celebrate our Judaism. Why are we memorializing this? Why are we sitting in this pain? Why are we sitting with this discomfort? So the first thing is it's to remind everybody not to become too depressed. But I also think there's an amazing, as Anna said, the joyous potential to Tisha B'Av. We're taught that the Mashiach himself is born on Tisha B'Av. We're taught, in fact, there's customs in the old days in the shtetl. This is no way telling you this is the role of women, but women had a custom of sweeping the house. Men can join in as well. Sweeping the house in preparation for Mashiach. It's a day of transformation. But why are we sitting with this discomfort? The answer is because there's two ways we can deal with our personal, not just national discomfort or communal discomfort, but our individual or family's discomfort. Well, how do we deal with discomfort? Most of us think of one option. When's the next holiday? When's the next distraction? Sometimes it's distractions and it's escapism and it leaves us even worse off. Sometimes it's good distractions. Yeah, let's run to the light. Who doesn't want to run to the light? Let's go and do good stuff. Let's go and help people in the community, like our pastoral officers. Or let's go and knock on a neighbour's door and help them. We're running to the light. We feel so good. We've forgotten about all our troubles that we were caressing over a cup of tea earlier on in the morning. That is absolutely not to be dismissed. But there's another, but it doesn't deal with the ultimate. It doesn't get you away. It doesn't heal the pain that you were in earlier that day, or whatever you're carrying with you, or even intergenerational trauma that you were carrying, no fault of your own from the previous generation. How do we actually transform and heal the concealment, the darkness itself? The answer is we have to sit with it. We have to sit with it and be uncomfortable in that darkness and find the light within the darkness itself. That's what really Tisha B'Av is. We're saying, God, all of these terrible things has befallen the Jewish people, ultimately because of one reason, which we can't really understand, which is the loss of your divine presence. in ourselves, in our communities, in the world itself. There's a disconnect that we feel between heaven and earth. And somehow, by spending a day in mourning and actually tuning into that, and that's really difficult. Do people actually do that? I don't know. It's very, very difficult. Even Tisha B'Av in the religious world can become an escapism. But that's really what we're doing. We're saying, and the reason I'm saying this, and I'll just finish off, is because in our own lives, we sometimes have, I know in my own life I have this, there's certain things, right, which I want to run to the light. It's too difficult to deal with the particular uncomfortability. But actually, if we stop and we're curious with the things that we find difficult in our lives, usually interpersonal relationships or how we relate to ourselves, that's usually where it's at, and sit with it and start to be curious about it, you'll be amazed how you have your own source of healing. How God himself, the light will come into you. You'll be able to see a new perspective, a new way of looking at the world, or your little world, a big world, which you'll look at the world as the glass half full rather than the glass half empty. That's what I wanted to share. So for me, Tisha B'Av, up until this year, has been a challenge, but hopefully this year for me is going to be transformative, and hopefully for you too.
We didn't just double click in enough, I don't think, onto what this whole mourning period is about. It's about the loss of, I know we said about all the painful tragedies in Jewish history, but specifically the loss of the temple, which again we don't really relate to because we never were there. We might have seen a reconstruction of how it looks, but we never visited, we never saw it in our lifetime. And why did we lose both the first and the second temple? Not because of any political movement, but because of very, very personal, interrelational goings on between man and man, between Adam Lachaveiro, between man and man, man and woman, woman and woman. Basic lack of derech eretz. It was basic lack of respect, lack of ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. Lashon hara. And that's the whole, there's this story, I think I said it one other time, this story in the Gemara of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. I don't know if you want to expand upon it, but because of not nice interaction between two men, it was played out in public, they say because of that was the whole reason why the temple was destroyed. So opportune time to work on our relationships, which was what we wanted to zone in on today. And of course the tricky relationships, family relationships, and basic respect, love, lashon hara. One of our children told me, if this, as I said before, if this turns out good, we're going to put this on a private YouTube link and send it out to people who weren't here today. But if these people ever hear this, then maybe they need to hear it. But one of our children, little story, relatable story, one of our children was on a bus recently and was sitting behind two from girls, okay, 18, 19-year-old girls. She didn't really know them, but she saw that they were religious girls, or so-called religious. And these two girls are a bit yachni, and they were saying to each other, "Oh, do you know so-and-so is going to Israel next week? Oh, is she? Oh, is she going to Israel? That's so nice." And then one of them says to the other, "Oh, do you know who's paying for her flight? Her parents are paying. It's true story. Her parents." One of our children sits behind listening to this. I mean, she wasn't eavesdropping, she just happened to be in on this conversation. And they said, "Oh, who's paying for the flight?" "Her parents paying." "Oh, yeah, her parents are paying." And the two girls concluded, "Oh, this girl who's not there, who's going to Israel next week, her parents are paying for the flight." Now, our child who was sitting behind said to me, "I would be absolutely mortified if I was the girl that they're talking about that is not there, and these two girls are making it their business to decide between themselves who is paying, is it me or my parents? And what have they concluded from the fact that they think that my parents have paid? Is that supposed to mean they're such good parents and they're so nice because they paid for her flight? Does that mean the girl's lazy because she's not worked to earn the money and to book the flight herself? You know, what good is coming from this silly conversation and this judgmental conversation that this girl who's going to Israel next week, her parents have paid for the flight? I mean, if you want to talk about this girl and the fact she's going to Israel, she's going to Israel. I hope she has a nice time. We look forward to hearing that she's had a nice time. Of what relevance, of what business is it to discuss whether her parents are paying and what that means if the parents are paying. So it's just a little thing, it's just a little it was a conversation, but it's just little things that we don't realise. We get caught up in such tittle-tattle. And for what reason?
All judgment and criticism of other people, or dislike of other people, or fighting, quarrels, all the things that happen are all rooted in one ultimate root. It's brought down in the Tanya, a very famous book from the 18th century, the founding philosophy of Chabad, in chapter 32, and it's when we think of ourselves as separate from other people, when we see ourselves as separate from other people, we're a Jewish people, we're all family, but we're separate individuals. If we see ourselves as separate bodies, to the extent that we think that way, in that fragmented way, which is the normal way of thinking, and how we feel and perceive things, as to the extent that we think that in that way, that's a broken way of thinking. It's an exile mentality, and it leads to further breakdown into Lashon Hara. To the extent that we understand we're all one body, which is the teaching in Judaism, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar 2,000 years ago, taught the Jewish people are one body and one soul. So imagine my body, right? Imagine my right hand fighting my left hand. If I started doing that, you'd say I'm not sure the NHS would know how to cope with it. I'm not sure what syndrome you'd call it. Auto beating oneself up syndrome. It doesn't make sense, because I'm one organism, and my right hand does right hand things, and my left hand does left hand things, and my head does other things, and it works, hopefully, as one organism. When the organism stops working in an integrated way and starts behaving in a fragmented way, that's what we call disease. We understand that on a physical level.
Dis-ease.
Dis-ease, I like that. Brilliant. Dis-ease. So it's the same thing spiritually. When we realize, when we start to train ourselves, this is what the training is of Judaism, when you start to train ourselves that we're all one. That's right. That there's a little bit of Stephen in me, and a bit of me, and think of the people that you really find you dislike, that they're in you too, right? And you start to look at the world that way and really truly lean into that, then you start to be able to love other people as yourself. Because otherwise it's impractical. How can God demand you to love your neighbor? I get that. Love your neighbor amazingly. I get that. Love your neighbor as yourself. How can you love somebody more than yourself? Unless they are you and you are they. We're all one. This is ultimately the teaching in Judaism. Echad means one. Echad is Aleph, Ches, Daled. 1, 8, 4. 1 plus 8 plus 4 is 13, which is the 12 tribes in Jacob. The Jewish people are all considered one, not just genetically, biologically, socially, culturally. Unless you're Sephardi, you eat different food, right? We have many, many diverse differences, but ultimately in our root, we are all the same, and that's the key idea. That the root of Moshe Rabbeinu's soul, Avram's soul, Sarah's soul, Rebecca's soul, some of the greatest people in our history, the root of their soul and the root of our soul is all one. And once we understand that and we connect to that idea, the more we connect to it, the more we will find it easier to be able to treat each other with respect and love.
I think the Haftarecha Kamocha, love your neighbour as yourself, goes wrong because, as you say, we're good at doing the Haftarecha, good at loving other people, Kamocha, like yourself. That's where we trip ourselves up, because a lot of people have self-esteem issues, low self-esteem, low self-worth. So if you don't love yourself properly, how can you possibly love anybody else? And I think this is what those two girls on the bus might have thought, which is, or been thinking, that deep down they are not happy themselves. So in order to boost their own self-esteem, they have to put that girl down who's going to Israel, and her parents are paying because she's so lazy and she can't afford to pay herself, and that somehow makes them feel better. But if you felt content, you feel grounded and good in yourself, and at ease and at peace in yourself, then you'd have no problem that if you hear your friend's going to Israel and you hope she has a nice time. So, opportune time to work on our relationships, which are tough because you can choose your family, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family.
And the Jewish people are all one family.
Especially if you are living with someone who is a very different personality. Just saying. So you're tested quite often, And that is a real test, and you have to be grateful to Hashem. Thank you for the test of having to deal with someone that is so different. So different. I can't understand this person. That is the test. That is the test every day. The challenge, but a good challenge.
I was saying something to Hannah before in the car on the way here about relationships. One of the deepest things we all want in a relationship, please tell me, put your hands up, perhaps, vote on this, we'll vote on this, is more than what the other person, it could be a spouse, it could be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be anybody, somebody that you have a deep connection with, more than what they give to you in terms of their time, in terms of their, time is maybe important, but in terms of what they physically give to you, right, the things that they give to you or do for you, is the fulfillment of the need you have to be understood. How often is it when you are yearning for somebody, you want the other person, you don't want to have to tell them, you want them to be able to understand you. And if you're speaking to them and you're trying to express yourself, but they're not on receive, no judgment, they may also have things going on in their life, that can be a very jarring thing. And the other thing, so does that make sense? We have a need for what's called in the mystics called this, for the light to enter into the vessels. We need to contain our relationship. We want to be understood. When we're understood, even if the matter's not resolved, that the problem is between us, just the very fact that we understand each other's perspectives, we feel not dis-ease, we feel at ease. We feel at ease, yeah? It's a very, very important thing, I think, in relationships that's overlooked. So next time, probably not if, but when, you're in some form of altercation, because God puts us through this world to deal with these challenges, if each person thinks, wait a second, apart from I think I'm right, I've got this, but they did this and they did that and they said this and this is not reasonable, their behavior, if I asked 100 people about this behavior, they'd all vote my way, and you may still be right, but you can also be wrong if you're not willing to understand the other person. Of course, I'm not talking about somebody who's abusive. That's different. But in the course of normal problems and blockages between people, if we can try and reach over and be curious to try and understand another person's perspective, because every single human being is totally a unique universe. I think the Talmud says, what does it mean that man was created in the image of God? It gives an analogy of a coin, a minter of coins. In the old days, you have a coin minter, and they go stamp, and they stamp each coin with King Charles's wonderful face, and that will be a £10 coin, a £1 coin or £2 coin. It says, but God's different. He stamps from His image, but every single image is different. A beautiful analogy. How actually, when we're interacting, imagine yourself, start seeing beyond the body. Right? We all know the body doesn't last forever. We have to start seeing each other as souls on fire, sparks of God. It says, Ner Havaya Nishma Sodom, the candle of God is the soul of man. Imagine we start thinking about, I wish I could do that. I don't do that all the time, but if we could strive to look at each other as little candles, individual candles, and each candle is completely unique, which means, by definition, the only way to understand the other person is to open myself to something beyond me. But we don't. I know that we get ourselves, we have what's called heuristics, of judgment heuristics. It's part of our survival mechanism to be able to get through social situations, to get through life. We walk into a room, straight away it's like, no, that one's not interested in me, this one's maybe interested in me. We do it straight away, we're doing it so quickly, we're not even aware of the process. We have to, and God put us in that situation for no coincidence. He's put us into that situation. It's not like, oh, it's not fair. We've got the ability inside of ourselves to arrest that process, to say, actually, you know what? Yes, I looked at that person and thought, yeah, they're not really interested in me, or they're a little bit arrogant, actually, and this person's a bit of a shlimazel, and this person's this, or whatever, giving examples, right? And to say, actually, to identify that feeling and say, but that's not how I'm going to behave towards that person. That's just reverie of the mind that's come to me from my animal soul, but who am I going to identify with right now? With my divine soul. This is the secret that Judaism has for the world. We're not one soul, we're two souls. We don't have to identify with our brokenness. We can actually identify with our wholesomeness, which is our divine spark inside at every moment. Yeah.
Can I I'll go back to that because it reminded me something really beautiful, which I think because Yannette's getting a bit tired. So we're going to keep everyone's attention. But as an immature person, I hope now we're all sort of going through. We've been here for 8 years, and as we're getting older, and as I said, it's nearly my birthday, so another year, and we're here on this earth to grow and to learn. So in my youth, I'd say maybe in my 20s, and every young girl, I think, well not every, but I'm just making assumptions. Lots of girls have this idea that there's a knight in shining armour, and he's there to rescue you, and you have this romance. Maybe you saw, romance films, and there's always this vision of this perfect man, and this knight in shining armour.
It's your mother who has that.
Huh?
It's your mother who has that.
My mother. I'll have to ask her.
She set me up to fail.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to think, no, that's Hollywood. That's not reality. There is no knight in shining armour. Sorry, anyone to burst the bubble. That's not real life. Real life requires maybe you found your knight. But real relationships is all about grafting. It's hard work, and I was so relieved. Probably maybe a decade or two ago, when I really focused on Rabbi Nachman's teaching, who is one of the Hasidic masters. Rabbi Nachman teaches that as many times as it can be broken, it can be rebuilt. And he himself said, many times did I stop in a day and start again, which means even if in a bad day, on a bad day, where even in the morning, first thing, something goes wrong, you have an argument, the coffee went wrong, that it doesn't mean the whole day is doomed. You can actually say, who cares about the coffee? I'll make a new one. And start it again, and that is so refreshing to know that we can always start again, because people write off relationships, you're out, but it's so refreshing and hopeful that we can, even if things go wrong, we can always start again. Rabbi Nachman can do it, and so can we. But just to go back to what you were saying about seeing everybody as a divine light, as a soul, so you wanted to say a word about Poland. So when Danny went, was it 2 weeks ago now? You were in Poland?
2 weeks today I came home. Gosh.
So I asked him who's on the trip, because he didn't know who was going. He thought maybe 20 or 30 people. And he was saying, nice people, Americans. And I was getting funny messages from Ilan that Americans are crazy. They just want to eat. And they're just totally a different mentality.
This goes out.
Yeah, they're a totally different mentality, and they're very, very funny. But other than the people leading the trip, I didn't know who was actually on it, and I think I saw a picture, but I didn't really, zoom in to look properly. But on the very last day, actually, we were in the airport, so he'd said goodbye to everybody. Danny said, I was speaking to there's a nice rabbi on the trip with us, and I was just speaking to him just now. I said goodbye to him now, he's called Rabbi Kalish. And I said, what? Rabbi Kalish? Now, this Rabbi Kalish is a very famous YouTube rabbi. He has a yeshiva in America, and his teachings go around, he has hundreds and thousands of views, and he's a big thing in America, a very, very famous rabbi. It's Rabbi Kalish. And Danny said he's on the trip with Rabbi Kalish. I said, Rabbi Kalish, I listened to him on YouTube, he's amazing, why didn't you tell me earlier? And Danny, you said you hadn't heard of him. But that's okay, I haven't heard of
some. It's like going on Poland trip with Michael Jackson and not realising who he is.
Yeah, I was trying to explain, so then I did say something
he's a
like
rabbi,
that. I said it's the equivalent of, I don't know who.
Anyway.
Yeah. So I then thought, you know what, I'm going to find a very popular, with a lot of thousands of views, of Rabbi Kalish online, and I'm going to send it to you and say, this is Rabbi Kalish. And obviously he was so humble that Danny didn't think he was this famous. I mean, everybody's famous because we're a unique one-off. But this famous rabbi, I'm going to send him the chip. So I was trying, when you're looking for something and you can just sod's law, you can never find the actual thing that you've seen before, but you can't find it. So I was clicking on his popular teachings online, finding did I send it you in the end? But I did click on one clip. I thought I've got to make sure it's a good one to send it you, to really impress you, to think, oh, you were on the trip with him. But this one sentence he said on one of his videos, he said that a lot of times in schools, because he's very into education, and he has a yeshiva for boys, and he said a lot of boys come to him and they're broken. Why are they broken? Because in school they've had a negative experience where they are not shown proper respect. It doesn't matter if you're 8, 10, 12, 15, 20. Every Jewish person, everybody deserves respect because you are a neshama, you are a divine soul. And if teachers looked at children as this person in front of me is a divine soul, they would automatically give them respect. And he said basically that's a big problem in the world at large today. Hopefully we can fix that through this. Just getting it out there, like you said, Ninette. The more we talk about things and we get them out there, it's not taboo, and it becomes a reality that hopefully we can all trailblaze to try and change it to good, to get to a better place, to bring the world to a better place, to bring more light. And I think we should wrap up now, and if anybody has any contributions, we want to hear you. Stephen, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say a lot of things, but time is short. First of all, I believe Tisha B'Av does make us remember a lot of bad things, anniversaries of various events over the centuries. And here in this country, in Spain, in Portugal, why are the Jewish people treated like this? Why anti-Semitism? It goes back a long time to biblical times, but I think that from my perspective, the bad things that happen to us, we all have experiences which make us think, why did this happen to me? You know, I'm a law-abiding, good person, and it's very difficult to understand, but I've learned, and you mentioned just now about education, but one very respected rabbi. Well, in Israel there are many respected rabbanim. One of the things that I learned from my daughter and her husband, well, relatively new husband, is the need for a coming together of the education system so that there is a meeting of minds, and this is one of the things that she's working with her own children, because there's a great need, and just really, without going on too much about it, in our own community, we know there are problems, and I, for one, and Ruth, we came here 4 years ago, and we welcome everybody and believe it's important to have a good relationship with everybody, regardless of whether we abide by their views, or whether we agree with them or we don't agree with them. It's a small community, and you know, I must pay tribute to Anna and Danny for the work that they do. It goes without saying as far as we're concerned, and we just hope that things will improve. So I just wanted to open it up a bit just to see whether other people
Thank you,
have
Stephen.
Thank
views
you.
on
Thank you.
I agree there. Yeah.
I have something to share, but I would rather hear from
Anybody else have
our
anything
esteemed,
to share?
very esteemed audience. Do you have any questions?
Lots of food for thought today.
You said about education.
Yes.
When we were in Poland,
Yes.
so we went to the Plaszów concentration camp. The Plaszów concentration camp is famous, was made famous in the Schindler's List film by our very own Steven Spielberg, where it was a brutal camp. It wasn't a death camp, it was a concentration camp. It was sited outside Krakow. If I'm right, yeah, it's just outside Krakow because that's where the Schindler's factory is, and it was the site of the old cemetery. And the Nazis actually made the Jewish people plough over their own cemetery, their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents' graves. So that today there's no record of any stone. However, there's one stone in the whole place which we come to. You come there, there's a house which was used by the Chevra Kadisha for this and was commandeered by the Nazis. I can't remember his name, the very infamous evil Nazi who took delight in killing Jews randomly in lineups. You see it in the film. And this stone is the stone of Sora Shnera. Have you heard of Sora Shnera? Sora Shnera, to use the phrase of Rabbi Pini Duna, who was actually one of the rabbis who gave talks along the sort of tour guide rabbi along the 4 days that we were there, described her in 2 words: an unlikely hero. Why? Because she died in 1935, well before, well, a few years before the Holocaust actually began. Obviously, she was aware, I'm sure, of Nazi Germany and of the rise of Nazi Germany. But she was living in Poland at the time. And why was she so special? Why was she described as an unlikely hero? You have to understand, in those days, in the shtetls, even though also the shtetls over the last 50 years before had moved into, and many of them had moved into industrialized cities like Krakow, like Warsaw, etc. And so now, for centuries and centuries, for millennia, the education of Jewish women suddenly changed. You had a situation where, up until that point, up until the turn of the 20th century, where were women educated? There was no such thing as a seminary. There was no such thing as Jewish schools for Jewish primary schools. We don't realize just how new this concept is. Women were beautifully taught mimetically at home by their parents, by their mothers, by their grandmothers, by their community. Their village brought them up. And that sustained the Jewish people until the urbanization, industrialization, where women now were forced often by state law, they had to have a secular education. And now you had a situation where they were rising in the ranks of secular education in science and other areas, but there was no educational system on a par from an academic perspective to compete with their secular education. And there was no way the more organic, Hamish, warm, beautiful education, as beautiful as it was going to be able to address the intellectual needs that now had become a reality for women. And so there was another thing that happened as well during that period, which shocked me and will shock you as well. That was one of the major triggers for Sora Shnera to create a revolution. And you'll see what she did. She created an educational revolution. So she saw this. She saw that there was impoverishment of spirit of the Jewish girls. And without the Jewish girls being educated, there's no next generation. What's the point in the Jewish boys? And we visited this wonderful yeshiva called the Chachmei the Blin, where the Daf Yomi share the Daf concept of 1 page a day, which Sarah is going to be finishing for the first time in a year or so. Takes 7.5 years to learn the Talmud, right? Sarah's getting there before me, right? 11 months, okay? 1 million words, 1 page a day. Where did this idea come out of? By Meir Shapira. He developed this whole concept in which now is a hotel called the Ilan Hotel in the Chachmei Lubin. What's the point, says Sora Shnera, of all these educational institutions for men if the women are educated? We're going to destroy Judaism. She felt existential threat to Judaism, and she understood that in Germany you had Samson Raphael Hirsch, where the women did have education, but it was very different type of community there. The Eastern European Jews were very different culturally to the German Jews. So there was another thing that triggered her as well. I'll just say very briefly. It's actually already on camera. Rabbi Pinney talks about it on camera. It's a rather disturbing episode in Jewish history that you've not heard of. And that is of Tzvi Migdal, is an organization which dealt with and exploited the issue of poverty in the turn of the century, major poverty amongst Jews in Eastern Europe, and they promised girls a better future in South America, when actually what they were doing, they were selling them into slavery and prostitution. They presented trafficking, they presented themselves in such a way, you can imagine, to be able to infiltrate the Hasidic communities at the turn of the century. We're talking about super committed, dedicated communities. And there's a lot of...
Who was it who did
there was an organization called Tzvi Migdal. Tzvi Migdal, before the war, it's disbanded now, it's disappeared. Seemingly they've not been brought to justice. That apparently about 150,000 girls overall were sent off to different places to South America and were lost to the Jewish people, and of course suffered terribly. And you can find out about this on a website called White Slavery. There's a section about it. Somebody told me to look it up there. The person, the Rabbi Duna, suggested this website. I went, and there's a few paragraphs about it, but I couldn't find much more. It's called Tzvi Migdal. There's lots of dark aspects of Jewish history anyway. She saw this and saw that how can there be that many and nobody realizes that the leadership are going Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, what's going on? So you can imagine, so those two factors are the big factors that got her around. This is a 5-foot lady, 5'5", very small lady, seemingly not very impressive person on paper. And she single-handedly went, knocked on the doors of the great rabbis of the day, the Chofetz Chaim and the Belzer Rebbe, and people who actually were not fully embracing. In fact, the Chofetz Chaim said, no, we don't think it's the right thing for our community at this stage. And the leadership of the Jewish people, the so-called official leadership, people that we revere and we study today their works, nevertheless, somehow or other, through divine providence, their eyes were blinded and they didn't have a solution for the Jewish people. And she saw the Jewish people were going to be destroyed. They were spiritually without women's education. She saw it happening, unfolding before her eyes. And the great rabbis are not doing anything. What's going on? So she single-handedly built what's known as Beis Yaakov. And pretty much any Jewish girl today who's been to a Jewish school, obviously today Beis Yaakov is very religious, it's Orthodox, you'd call it probably from ultra-Orthodox Haredi, but from the concept of Beis Yaakov spawned the whole concept of Jewish education for Jewish women all around the world. And so basically, Anna, me, I don't know who else went to Jewish schools. If you went to anyone that's been to a Jewish school, you went to Sam. Anyone that's been to an official Jewish school has their Jewish education ultimately to thank this one lady. And I bring this story. I tell you why I bring this story to you because today in Israel there seems to be we're at a crossroads. There seems to be the different sections and factions that are like at odds with each other. There's the secular who believe all the religious need to go in the army. There's the certain major sections of the religious community, not all at all. It's not all, who are pushing for an agenda where they are exempt from the army, and there's all these issues that are going on, and we're crying out for leadership. But what I got from this story when he told me that I had a wave of hope as I'm standing on the ruins of Pasha Geta. And apparently they have her stone. They have a stone there. I've got a picture of it. Maybe I'll share it. I'll write an article and we'll share it on the website. Please God. Disciples of hers, I believe, as an addendum, I heard about this, went after the war and they remembered where she was buried based on certain geographic locations, reference points, and they all came up with their own independent calculations and sort of averaged it out, and that's where they put the stone up. So they don't know exactly. It's probably within a few meters from where she's buried. Could be right. Could be exactly right. Let's hope it's right. But what I got from this story was a tremendous wave of hope. There's going to be, however much we see there's a brick wall in front of us and it doesn't seem to be changed and the Jewish people seem to be going around in circles, there will be, I can assure you, there will be a Sarashnira somewhere. It might be a woman, it might be a man, it might be a group of people, it might be somebody from St Anne's who comes up and knocks on the door of authority and is told, sorry, that's not for us, and they forge ahead and go and do that and do it for themselves. And I think we're seeing that already. We're seeing that already in many ways, and you can evidence that in Israel. There's many startup ideas, not just startup nation building amazing high-tech companies. I'm talking about ideas of bringing religious and secular people together. There's a healing process happening beyond the headlines of the left-wing newspapers. Post-October the 7th, there's this healing process that's happening, and it's very, very beautiful to see it happening. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for ending by talking about a woman, seeing as this originally is the lady's shiur. You ended up speaking about Sarah Schneerer, who is up there with the Jewish female heroines of the modern era. And to all of you who are heroes and heroines for coming today, because being here today shows you really care about Jewish education, knowledge, and growth. That's what we're here to do.
It's been very interesting.
And it's a process, and every day brings new opportunity. And just when I was saying before, one very, very quick thing is that when we said about relationships are work in progress, we see this in nature, in the autumn, the leaves fall off the tree, and in the winter, the tree looks very sad and bare, and you think there's no hope, but in the spring it all blossoms again. So all the time we're being renewed, recreated, every day brings new opportunity, and today we can all be very proud of ourselves that we've come here to have this very, hopefully, meaningful, thought-productive conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.